Welcome back to Shore Sports Talk on 94.3 The Point. I am Vin Ebenau, joined by Bobby Skinner again from Talkin Giants. He's got the Talkin Giants podcast you can listen to on Spotify and Apple Podcast, always breaking down the Giants and coming off a busy part of the offseason with the NFL draft that just took place a couple weeks ago, and then some signings that followed it. So, Bobby, before we start breaking it down here, thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, no doubt. Always a pleasure. And like you said, it's like, okay, now it's set. We got 2 months to get ready for camp. Now it's Ross. It's always nice when you hit the roster set. There's so much speculation once the season ends that now this is what we're dealing with. Let's roll.
Looking at the draft, and I know they made some, signed some undrafted free agents and everything else in the days that followed it, but what was your biggest takeaway from the draft? Did you come away with that figuring that, okay, the Giants are set, or that I still need to kind of see this play out to figure out who's going to play where and how good this Giants team could actually be?
Yeah, so they're definitely a better team, especially with the free agency additions of guys like Bobby Okereke. You go out, you get Darren Waller. Like those are two huge additions. Then you get your draft picks. They are going to be a better team than last year. The question is, will they be a team that has the same record as last year? But I think with all the new additions, you actually have more questions than you do answers, because especially on the offensive side of the ball, Vin, is week one, we have no idea what this offense's philosophy is going to be, because they are a very much different offense, and if Evan Neal can improve, like that's maybe the biggest addition they can get is a better Evan Neal. And then you have Darren Waller out there, who's, second best receiving tight end in the NFL, arguably after Travis Kelce. You get, you add speed and Jalen Hyatt. You get a center in John Michael Schmitz that I think we might see what originally these coaching staff wanted to do with their offense, which was to be more explosive, create big plays, not have to play perfect ball where you're not turning over the ball and working quick game and play action. And then you forget, like, they should still be able to run the ball with Saquon Barkley too. So like week one is going to be a big, like, what is this offense trying to do? What is their identity? So it's all the additions on offense leave you with more questions, because it's like, okay, what do they want to do?
I had a feeling in the draft, or at least was hoping maybe, that they would attack receiver, linebacker, some early on, but they went corner with Deonte Banks out of Maryland in the first round, and then they ended up getting Javarius Owens, a safety, in the seventh round. Did it surprise you how much attention that Joe Shane and Dayball and everybody were, and Wink too, who certainly celebrated the Banks pick, went after the secondary?
No, because there was such big. I mean, outside, the Dory Jackson, and you have like no other Dory Jackson and Xavier McKinney. You have no other piece that you're confident, like, okay, this guy's going to be a good player. Like, there's Cordell Flaw is young and exciting, but we don't know if he's going to be good. Still outside of safety, like Javarius Owens as a 7th round pick I think is going to come and compete for playing time, with the other safety position. You have a group of guys at Pinnock, Bobby McCain, and other guys who, again, guys you aren't really super confident in. And then, I mean, they had Fabian Moreau wasn't even on their roster when they cut down to 53 last year, and he was their starter all season long after the first couple of games. So I get it. Like, cornerback was a big position in need. It was a deep draft class, so I definitely understand why they wanted to add secondary, especially in a Wink Martindale defense that prioritizes that.
I like the draft that Joe Shane had overall. I guess I was wondering when he would make any kind of trades, and obviously eventually he did, a couple of them. But I was with that string of receivers going off the board in the late part of the first round, I was like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm like, I guess Giants are not going to go receiver here or even try to move up. Did that surprise you when that receiver run started, that the Giants didn't try to move up, or at least that we know of?
I think they might have tried to move up because they really like Zay Flowers. But it is funny because at pick 20, the Seahawks are on the clock. No wide receivers have been taken off the board. So you have 6 picks with 4 wide receivers that you would see them targeting. And you're like, okay, like, we're probably going to end up with a wide receiver here. And then, like you said, 20, 21, 22, and 23, all were picked wide receivers. And then they trade up to pick 24. Like, they really liked Zay Flowers out of Boston College. And I think there was some attempt to go and get him. Obviously, didn't work out. But yeah, it was surprising to see all the wide receivers there at 20, and then you're like, okay, we're probably gonna end up with one of these guys if you're a betting man, and then four picks later, they're all gone.
and I know they took Jalen Hyatt in the third round. I'm surprised he fell to the third, but I like Jalen Hyatt. I know he had the big game at Alabama. In that was just a phenomenal game to watch between Tennessee and Alabama. Hendon Hooker was a really great quarterback in college. Unfortunately, got hurt, and that's why he slipped in the draft, I think. But I thought Hyatt's a good receiver, and I think he's got a lot of potential for what the Giants could end up doing. And I feel like with all the pieces they got in the offseason at receiver, including the veteran Paris Campbell there, that Hyatt could fit into this system. I know he went into the slot a good amount at Tennessee, so I like the upside for Hyatt. What are your thoughts on Jalen Hyatt and what he could do for the offense?
I mean, speed, right? Speed. That's what they want. There was rumors coming out of the combine, when people were talking about the Giants, is like they are putting a premium on adding speed to this offense because they were a very slow offense in 2021 or 2022, sorry. And that's what he adds. Now, in that Tennessee offense, there was just asked to run straight for the most part, and his route running wasn't great. And that's something that's going to have to be cleaned up with this coaching staff and really taught, because at Tennessee, they didn't ask him to run very many routes. And most of his productions did come from just running past defenses, but you love that ability of speed to have that ability to run past guys, and then you can coach up the rest of the stuff. So I bet you if John Michael Smith went at pick 56, I wouldn't have been surprised if Hyatt would have been the pick at 57, and Joe Shane said it, once they got down with that second round pick, he told his guys, like, go find me trades where I can trade up to get Hyatt, and then it came with the Rams. They move up 16 spots and get their guy.
And I'm wondering if how much of the thing that went into that is like, let's move ahead of Cleveland here because we think that they're going to take Hyatt, and they ended up taking another Tennessee receiver, his teammate anyway, who has a little bit of an injury risk. So I guess with how it worked out, the Giants ended up getting a good receiver with less of a noted injury history too.
Yeah, and he just has like that speed. Like Cedric Tillman's actually like a better route runner and stuff than Hyatt, but Hyatt has that speed element that they're looking for. Where Tillman, I don't know how well he would have fit on this roster right now.
What do you think? I mean, I like the John Michael Schmitz pick. Obviously, the Giants needed a center in more than one way to actually have an actual center on the roster and everything as well. But what do you like so much about John Michael Schmitz? What are your expectations, I guess, as well for what he could do as a rookie center?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he was the best center in the class, and I thought he was had the best offensive line film in the entire class outside of Skoronski. Like even Paris Johnson and Broderick Jones out of Georgia. Obviously, you pick those guys in the first round. They play tackle. They have the athleticism to be really good. But like his film is amazing. Like I love that pick. It was the ultimate like best player available meets need. And I think the only reason he was there and not a first rounder is one, he doesn't have like the fastest feet in the world, right? And that's what you want to look for with interior guys, like your however fast your feet move, but they're not slow in any manner. He works really good, has really good hand usage, works leverage really well. Like he's just has great film. And then also he's 24 years old, so he's older than most teams like to draft early, right? Like we saw it with Joe Shane. We've seen it with Joe Shane that they like to go young, especially with their earlier picks. But when you have a guy like John Michael Smith there at pick 57, you have one guy who started center games on your roster, and you just picked him up as a minimum contract from the Steelers and J.C. Hassenbauer. You needed a center in the worst way possible, and I thought you got the best one in the class, even better than Tippmann, who went ahead of him.
And they also went after the defensive line, too. I mean, it was a seventh-round pick with Jordan Riley, the D-tackle out of Oregon. And I know we've talked about this in the past, Bobby, with depth, a few months back when you were on the show. Just, okay, we got Dexter Lawrence, who thankfully got that nice big contract extension, and Leonard Williams, but there was some depth that just wasn't there. Do you think that Riley and some of the other guys that the Giants have picked up in the offseason will help on that defensive line?
So Riley was the one pick where I wasn't like huge on it. I think his like role in the NFL will be as a fifth defensive tackle. But they added A'Shawn Robinson, which kind of went quiet because it happened a couple of days before the draft. Like he's a good player, and they gave him actual real money with void years and stuff. And then they added Rakeem Nunez-Roches, who's a good run defender from the Bucks. too. So Jordan Riley, I see his role as being like a backup nose tackle, backup nose tackle and fifth guy on that defensive front. But they did put a premium this offseason in stopping the run, and that came with their free agency signings of Ashawn Robinson, Nunez Roches, and then Bobby Okereke, obviously, is a linebacker, is huge because their linebacker position was their weakest position on the roster last season.
And where do you think
it's still very weak after him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, certainly still a part of that that has to be addressed, I guess, at some point. Where do you think the linebacker core stands now? I know it was pretty barren, after last season, and some that was clearly a glaring need, but where do the Giants linebackers stand right now? What can be done even at this point?
We just recorded a show, and we did a mailbag, and someone asked us who's going to be inside linebacker too. So Bobby Okereke is obviously your starter. There is no good or even intriguing answer for the inside linebacker too.
Yeah.
Like you have Darian Beavers, who his preseason game might be being a little overhyped, who's coming off of a torn ACL. He was already an older prospect out of Cincinnati. You have Micah McFadden, who didn't look very good last year. And then you have Jared Davis, who Micah McFadden was benched for, but Jared Davis hasn't been a good linebacker in the NFL either. And the Lions, as bad as their defense was, they wouldn't even activate him off the practice squad. And he was starting a playoff game for us. So with linebacker, there's outside of Okereke, there's no fun answer for who's going to be the starter there. Like they got a UDFA, Deontay Johnson out of Toledo. I think he's just as much in the conversation as anybody else to make the roster there.
So, I mean, really, I guess we could probably have to find out a lot of these answers in training camp and in the preseason with what this defense could actually do, how much better it could be. I mean, I know from his reaction, Wink loved the Deonte Banks pick in the first round. Do you get the sense that Wink Martindale is confident with the group of guys that he's got right now heading into training camp and so forth this summer?
Well, they're going to work to stop the run. Like, that's a huge improvement. Despite what we just said about the linebacker position, Okereke is a huge addition. And then adding those defensive linemen, they were really, really bad stopping the run. And that's not very characteristic for a Wink Martindale defense. Like, that last season in Baltimore with Wink Martindale, like that defense, it wasn't very good, right? They had the corner injuries and they let him walk. That defense wasn't very good. Guess what? They were number one in the NFL still at stopping the run that season. So I know that nothing eats up a defensive coach more than seeing your team get run on at will.
Yeah.
And they put an emphasis on that. So that's where there's going to be big improvements. Deontay Banks are probably going to be some rookie struggles. Hopefully Adoree Jackson could stay healthy. But you do have improvements essentially at every single position that needed improvements. Really the only one that wasn't improved was the edge depth.
On offense, I know they made a couple signings before the draft, including bringing a couple guys back, Hodgins and Slayton. Then they ended up signing Jamison Crowder and Paris Campbell and so on. They brought back a lot of the guys. They added a couple more. No, I guess, star number one like we were all thinking that they could have gotten, but they've got a bunch of receivers with a bunch of different skills. Some that I'd like to see play out just to see how this will all work and how good this wide receiver core can be. But where do you think things stand? What is your take on how the Giants wide receivers look right now, and can they do what they need to do for Daniel Jones and that offense?
It's fascinating. It's definitely a wide receiver room that you can get through an NFL season with not feeling horrible about. Now, again, you still, like you said, have that need for that number one guy. But if you ask anyone who are going to be the starting 3 wide receivers week 1, first snap of the game, you'd probably get one of them wrong because you have so many different guys. And you have guys that are versatile, like Jalen Hyatt, inside, outside, versatile. Paris Campbell, inside, outside, versatile. Hodgins, even though he's a bigger and not the fastest guy, you can move him around a little bit. Slayton's like stuck out of there on the outside, but he's the one that's being paid the most. And then Wan'Dale Robinson coming off of a torn ACL, like he's your slot-only guy. Drafted him with a high second-round pick. We'll see where he is injury-wise. And then we keep forgetting the guy who's been the consistently best Giants wide receiver since they lost Odell, Sterling Shepard. Now,
That's
I'm not
right.
putting any expectations on Sterling Shepard. Anything that Sterling Shepard gives me as a bonus, I'm not putting any expectations after all the injury stuff he's been through. But you have 6 guys who, if they're starting on an NFL team, no one's blinking at.
Right. And one of the things that concerns me is with Shepard and Robinson coming off the injuries that they're coming off of with the ACLs and everything is what kind of limitations will they be under? Will they have to slowly kind of ease into how many snaps in the preseason and training camp? I mean, are these going to be guys that other defenses go and target and try to get them to, I don't know, make a dig route or something like that and see what they can do when they have to twist and turn upfield?
Yeah, Wandale will be the big question mark because, again, Shepard, he's old. Honestly, I thought Shepard should have retired at this point. Like, I love Sterling Shepard, but
sure.
It just felt like time came back on a minimum contract, so there's no risk in it. But it felt like it was that time. Wandale, though, I mean, that was the third pick ever by this Giants regime, and their first second-round pick was Wandale Robinson. So they clearly like him and want to have a plan for him, and they were involving him more, and then he tore that ACL. So I'm not even like intrigued for him week 1, but how about week 10? Like, say the wide receiver room stays healthy, week 10. Is Wandale Robinson playing over Paris Campbell or Jalen Hyatt or Darius Slayton or Isaiah Hodgins? Like, I don't know if I would put him over those guys. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Wandale.
And going back to the offensive line, obviously they made a big, much-needed pick at center. We got Thomas back, Evan Neal back at tackle. Where do you think things stand at the guard spot? I mean, is Azudu going to be healthy? Is everybody else going to be healthy? I mean, what's that rotation going to look like?
Unfortunately, they're going to play Mark Lewinsky at right guard. They gave him that contract. As much as I don't think he should be just slated in at that spot, he is.
Agreed.
Azudu, man, again, another guy taken very early by not very early, but day 2 by the Giants. Great ability, fast, quick as feet as you can get for that guard spot is what you look for those guys, but needed a lot of development. And he did develop some from the first week of the season when he got hurt. And then Ben Bredesen was their best interior guy last year. Like, he was better than Mark Lewinsky, John Feliciano, and Josh Azudu last year. But it seems like he's the guy who's kind of left out in this, which doesn't make sense to me. So I personally would let Azudu battle with Lewinsky and slate Ben Bredesen in as a starting job. Now, where you put those guys on the left or the right is a little complicated. My hope would be that Lewinsky doesn't start, but it seems like he's the sure starter. So I can foresee myself not being in love with how that room's being handled.
Yeah, certainly something that we'll have to see play out and to see how it works. But yeah, no, Glowinski's was frustrating to watch, I guess, to say the least, with some of how he played in a lot of the games last season.
And Ben Bredesen was just unbiasedly better, right? Sorry, not unbiasedly, objectively just better. So, like, you would think he'd be slated in there, but Ben Bredesen's got an injury history of his own, not like anything major, but like constant, like in and out of the lineup type stuff.
And Daniel Jones getting the 4-year contract extension. Now it's sort of like hey, here's what the market looks like kind of money kind of contract, but do you feel like Jones can take that next step, knowing that he's got some extra receivers, that they work to address the line? They even drafted an extra running back to add to that depth. And even, of course, Darren Waller at tight end. Do you think that Jones can finally take that next step that the Giants have been looking for?
I think Waller's going to be huge because he's got a guy that can create explosive plays without having to chuck the ball 40, 50 yards down the field too. I do think Daniel Jones is going to take the next step. Now, what is the next step, too? Because he was a good quarterback last year, but they played a very controlled offense where it's like, we are not going to turn the ball over. We're going to work the quick game. We're going to work play action. But they didn't have the horses on the outside to go out and stretch the field. Now they do. So now do we see, is Daniel Jones an inherently conservative quarterback, or was it being coached into him, which it seemed like it was last year? Do we see a guy who can create explosive plays while not suffering a bunch of turnovers, which he hasn't done since the first half of his second year? So it'll be interesting to see. Daniel Jones is going to be a better quarterback. He was a good quarterback last year. He will be better with new weapons. But the question is, what step are we taking up to? Are we taking the step up to the Dak, like the Dak Prescott, top 7 consistently, top 7 to 8 quarterbacks? Or is he in that top 12 comfortably where it's like he has years where he's going to look like a top 10? Which is what he is right now, I think. Sort
of where he's, good, but not great or even elite. He's, a good quarterback to help him, but
no expectation to get to the Mahomes, Burrow, Allen. But that I'm also a big believer of like you will kill yourself trying to get to that level. So can we get to that next tier of the Matthew Stafford types, who it's like, no, we can flat out win Super Bowls with this guy. You're going to need a good team, but most teams do anyway. So.
How would you, Bobby, how would you grade the offseason to this point, whether it's signings, trades, the NFL draft? I mean, did the Giants do everything they needed to do and do everything that they could have done in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I basically, I don't know about a grade, but I will say this offseason makes me feel a lot better than last offseason, right? Like the draft, I love what they did in this draft a lot more compared to last year's. Just with the exception of the first round, you get Evan Neal, Thibodeau, first Deontay Banks. But like day 2 and day 3, I love what they did. And then free agency, I thought you went out, you were smart, you didn't overpay, and you got good players. Where last year in free agency, due to the cap issue, so it wasn't Joe Shane's fault, but you had to sign. You were basically only signing bad players, and Mark Lewinsky was your biggest contract at $6 million a year. And you knew he wasn't going to be very good. It was like, can he be average or above average?
Sure.
And I thought he was a little below that. So this offseason definitely makes me feel a lot better about than last offseason. Obviously Joe Shane was hamstrung with the cap situation, but I just thought they did a better job. It was the second year on the job. Has all his staff in there for the scouting process, where he was firing guys right after the draft last year where it wasn't really his guys in there, so he had a lot more trust in them, knowing what the coaching staff wants. So yeah, I don't know exactly what I give as a grade, but I'm really confident in everything and most of the things that they did.
And what are some of the, I mean, obviously they're practicing all off-season workouts and everything, and then obviously in the training camp and so forth. What are some things that you'd like to see, between now and, July, August, when they're really getting into the, contact, they're really getting into the hardcore plays, really, taking it out on the field, starting to play other opponents, joined practices and so on and so forth. How would you like to see the younger players, the rookies develop? What are some things you would like to see that the Giants are doing well offensively and defensively, so that by the time they get to preseason games, we're like, all right, they're trending in a good direction?
So between now and OTA, like between now and training camp, the things I'm looking for, not necessarily like guys playing well, because it's hard to judge off that.
Yeah.
Is the first thing is who's the signal caller on defense? Is it going to be Bobby Okereke or Xavier McKinney? Wink Martindale hinted that it might be Okereke. McKinney was it last year. I'd like Okereke to be it. Second is John Michael Smits, the way he snaps the ball. It was a huge topic for me during rookie camp. He does that like dead ball. If people who are listening don't know, like just Google dead ball snap versus regular snap in the NFL. He does the dead ball snap. Almost no one does that in the NFL. Will they let him keep that? And then the third one, Evan Neal, who a lot of the season is riding on Evan Neal.
Yeah.
He changed some things up in his stances, and he's changed some things up, had an offseason to work on. How does he just look in the first 2 seconds of a play, right? Like, does he look like he's getting off the ball quicker, which was a big issue for him, like that? Because I think that will help him in a lot of his issues. So those are like the 3 things I'm looking for that you can look for between now and the day training camp starts.
And a non-Giants question for you, just kind of with looking at what other teams did in the NFL draft in the offseason. To me, I think the Eagles just found a way to get even more scarier on defense. I mean, they've got half their defenses from the University of Georgia. But are there any teams that really stood out to you with what they did in the offseason or the draft that kind of say, oh boy, the Giants, when they play these guys, they may be in trouble?
Let's see. Gosh, you get so lost in the sauce of covering one team.
Sure.
The Eagles, obviously, like you mentioned. The Cowboys got Mozzie Smith. And
that was
some other thing.
That was a big pick for them.
They did in the draft. This team's got their defensive line stronger, so that's gonna be interesting. I'm trying to think of common opponents. I thought the Jets didn't have the best draft in the world. In the last 2 years before that, I love the Jets draft. Like, they're my favorite draft class coming out of it.
Sure.
But I didn't love Will McDonald and Joe Tippmann being their first 2 picks.
Yeah, those are curious picks.
And so this isn't related to the Giants, but the Colts. I think the Colts just they're kind of funny in the way that they just draft the tallest guys at every position. Like, every position outside of Josh Downs was just, this guy's in the top percentile of height. They got a 6'4" and a 6'2" corner. They got a 6'8" tackle, and there was a couple other ones in there where it's like, yeah, you guys just love tall players, and you guys are living true to that stereotype about this Colts scouting department. So I thought that was interesting. Who made some good picks in the Seahawks? So we played the Seahawks. That's one.
Yeah.
I thought the Seahawks getting Jackson Smith and Jigba with the first pick, add that guy to Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, getting Devin Witherspoon to pair with Tariq Woolen. So the Seahawks are on the Giants' schedule this year. They beat them last year, and I think they're a team that's going to improve a good amount too.
That's a scary offense in Seattle too. It's kind of like it was sneaky scary last year with like, oh wow, these guys got the receivers, they got the running backs. Geno Smith having the year of his career, and they could find different ways to be in. When they got Jackson Smith and Najee, I'm almost like, oh boy.
Yeah. So yeah, the Seahawks were definitely one that I came away impressed with.
Bobby, as we wrap up the conversation here, how do you? I mean, we talk about teachers getting the summer off. I mean, giant football teams get a couple months of reprieve. How do you take the off season? After the draft and some of the exciting stuff before OTAs and everything else gets going. How do you brace yourself for another football season?
I treat it like a teacher schedule, where it's like you get like a little bit of a summer vacation. So I will be on vacation this upcoming week, and then I spend these 2 months because I'm not gonna tire myself out, because that's what the season and the draft is for.
Right.
But I will go and look and try and learn new things about football. Like, so I'll go watch videos on YouTube of coaches like breaking down these play concepts and stuff, and watching other people's stuff and trying to learn more about the game and learn about passing concepts. And maybe looking at Giants rookies from last year and seeing like how did they develop as the year went along. So not losing my mind, but keeping a nice workflow of
there you go,
guys. And I'm down here in Florida, so get to the beach a good amount too.
That's not a bad way to spend the off season. So, Bobby, appreciate your time as always in talking Giants football, and look forward to talking again as things get rolling along later this summer.
No doubt, always appreciate you, Vin.
That is Bobby Skinner from Talkin' Giants. You can check out his podcast, Talkin' Giants, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, and follow him on Twitter as well. More Shore Sports talk on 94.3 The Point right after this.